right, we'll call the October 19th Planning Commission meeting to order. We'll see if we barely have a determination of quorum, but looks like we do. We need to see about approving the minutes of the September 21st, 2022 and October 5th, 2022 Planning Commission meetings. Do we have any adjustments to those or a motion to approve?
If there are none, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes have been approved. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Thanks to a past city council member, we don't have to read these all out. So anyway, is there anyone in the audience, anyone in part of the Planning Commission would like to, for us to have or review one of these consent agenda items? Seeing none, we will need to make a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye. Y'all are going to have to hold your weight today. There's only 4 of us. Wake up.
Any opposed? All right. Under old business, the first item of old business is the Lytle Creek Commons site plan amendment for 63 single-family attached dwelling units, otherwise called townhomes, on approximately 4.97 acres zoned RM16, located at the southwest corner of Middle Tennessee Boulevard and Forest Point Drive. Legacy South Advent Capital Partners is the developer. Ms. Smith, are you handling that?
Mr. Chairman,
sorry.
There was some discussion at the last meeting and questions about entitlements and about also vesting.
Yes,
and,
sir.
I didn't go into any really response to that at that time. I wanted to look at the matter further. That it's a relatively complicated statute, but I would like to talk a little bit about the vesting rights first, if I may.
Okay.
The state vesting law is a bit complicated, but it does provide, in essence, that once a site plan or other development plan is approved, and in Murfreesboro, approval is when the minutes to the meeting where the motion was made to approve it are approved. The reason we do that is because until the minutes are approved, there's a possibility that what some of us thought happened at the meeting didn't happen at the meeting, and someone says, no, that's not what I meant, should say this. So in other words, just to be safe that it really was approved, in Murfreesboro, approval is when the minutes that are approved where that action was taken. So we are well, and then it's vested for 3 years, and we are within that 3-year period. So the first point, I guess, or the first line would be that yes, they're vested. There are provisions that they can lose vesting if they make changes to their plan. Under state law, and that an amendment that's proposed by the developer can be denied if that amendment alters the proposed use, increases the overall area of the development, alters the size of any non-residential structure in development, increases the density of the development so as to affect traffic, noise, or other environmental impacts, or if it increases the local government's expenditures necessary to implement or sustain the proposed use. This amendment does none of those things. So this amendment then that's being proposed would not cause them to lose their vesting. There are a number of changes to the plan that are included in this amendment, and the other interesting factor in this is that the changes the critical changes, the changes that are of concern, are not changes that were that are the developer's idea. He was forced to make some changes because of the lawsuit that was filed, and then the settlement that they reached, rather than spending another 5 years in litigation, and also the fact that their proposal to put HVAC units in the front yard was rejected by the codes department because that room at the front of the unit is a bedroom, and the air conditioning units would interfere with the ability to evacuate if it's necessary. So changes were forced on them. It wasn't that they came in and said, we've got a better idea, we've got a new idea, we're going to change things around. That hasn't happened. They were forced to make some changes because of the lawsuit and because of the codes issue, and because the city required access onto the private driveway. So it would be a little incongruent, I guess I would say, for us to reject their plan because it changed, and it changed because we made them change it. So while, you know, I would say that there are vested rights, and there's some changes that are required, and then so how those changes are implemented, I mean, that doesn't give them the right to make whatever change they want to it. And again, they haven't increased the density, though. They haven't done those kinds of things. I think many of the I guess I'd say objectionable features of this plan are features that were approved by the Planning Commission a couple years ago. And so to revisit those issues is I think problematic legally, to change that to something that was that essentially was approved. I think the other point about whether the plan has to be approved if it meets minimum standards, there are exceptions to that. One of the exceptions is that the trash pickup has to be approved, and there's no minimum standard for trash pickup. Now, that's not an issue in this case, but that is an issue that Planning Commission needs to look at and approve or disapprove, and there's no minimum standard to that. I don't think that's an issue in this case. I understand that the proposal they've made for solid waste is acceptable. The other issue is that where, and this is out of our zoning ordinance, this is section 7F, which is the criteria for Planning Commission site plan review. When a multifamily development is proposed adjacent to existing single family or along a major thoroughfare, the Commission shall have authority to require any or all of the following in an amount or to an extent other than as required by any ordinance or resolution, subregs, or policies. And the things that can be required are additional buffer, arranging of structures, or meet other conditions of approval in order to mitigate any adverse impact that might affect the adjacent homes or area. And I don't think that the points that are being discussed really would fall into the issue of an adverse impact on the existing, the nearby residential areas. But the point being just that there are areas where Planning Commission approval is not mandated just because minimum standards are met. So there, you know, I guess the starting point really is that if it meets minimum standards, it should probably be approved, but there's at least 2-3 other areas where there's discretionary approval, where it's not mandated just because the other minimum standards are met. And again, this is I want to say more complicated than usual, but I guess anything that gets into this gets complicated. But the fact that there was litigation and the fact that there was a codes issue that was unforeseen by them when they made their first plan and was unforeseen by us, you know, none of this body are not codes, building codes enforcement, not part of our bailiwick. So that wasn't caught by us, and then so everything was approved, but unfortunately, it couldn't be built as approved. And one of the other factors of this is if they were making changes that, and if the Planning Commission did have authority to reject it, there was the kinds of changes that would allow Planning Commission to reject it, then they would have the right to build the original plan. And of course, because of the litigation and the codes issues, they can't build the original plan. So it puts everybody in a bit of a box. But I think that that y'all need to look at the 3 areas that were mentioned in the staff report, and again, your authority is to approve with conditions. I don't have that part language in front of me. Matthew has it, I'm pretty sure, but approve with conditions, deny with conditions. I don't think it could be deferred without the applicant's agreement, because I think we're at the 65-day timeline from the, in fact, we're probably past that now, and the applicants did approve, they did agree to the last deferral, but, and if the applicants are willing to defer, if they want some more discussion, that certainly could be happened, but I don't think if we defer without their approval, then I think what they've submitted to us is automatically approved. So we're in a tight situation in a way in terms of what authority that we do have in terms of this amendment, but it doesn't. There's certainly some leeway for discussion about the provisions in it that are contained in this amendment. I hope that was confusing enough to everybody.
So if, I won't try to summarize it, but I will ask a question. So the way I'm hearing it is that we would only be able to discuss or lay in on the 3 items that are being mentioned as part of the comments that staff has?
I think that's what was our joint conclusion, I believe, and of course, staff I believe, has put these 3 additional considerations on the staff comments because those issues were raised by Planning Commission at the last meeting. There were concerns that were expressed by the Planning Commission at the last meeting. But again,
and we could not defer based upon us not feeling comfortable still with respects to the 3 items in question, is what I also heard you say.
Not unless the applicant agrees.
Okay.
If we defer, it gets approved.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
If after the discussion on these points, if there is still concerns and if the applicant's willing to have another deferral, then you could do that, but unless the applicant agrees to that.
So just so the applicant knows, if we do deny it based upon not being able to come to an agreement with these 3 items, at what point can they bring it back to the Planning Commission?
Matthew?
I believe that they could, if it was there's a waiting period for zonings. I'll have to look and see if there's a waiting period for site plans. I think even if there were, that could be waived if the plan is substantially or is significantly, if staff of the Planning Commission feels that it significantly addresses whatever concerns there were. But I'll look at the zoning ordinance and get back to you on that.
If there's some, I think a zoning it says it can't be brought back for 18 months unless it's substantially different. But the commission would have the authority, if that same provision applies here, you would have the authority to waive that and take it back at the next meeting or whatever.
Okay. So it sounds like, and somebody here can correct me if I'm wrong, we need to hear from staff with regards to these three items, because I think
Right.
we've got a new board member who may have watched a video, but, and I have not introduced him yet, but Brian Prince, thank you for joining us, appreciate that. And you could start off with a good one. So, unless the Planning Commission doesn't want to hear it, I think it would be a good idea for Ms. Smith to come up and speak with respects to those three items, and then we can
Right.
take it from there.
I
We'll see.
agree. I'd like to hear from
Okay.
staff.
Well, good afternoon, Commission. As we had mentioned, about a month ago, we came back to you, and the applicant had agreed to a deferral back then, and then was not able to make your very next meeting, so that's why we've put it off for 30 days. But what staff heard from the Planning Commission was there were really three different concerns. One of the easier ones, if you look at your staff report, item number 5, parking areas kind of in front of those garages. We didn't like the striping. As I was talking to the applicant, they said they are fine with that particular condition and believe that asphalt with concrete separators in between those was an easy fix that would take care of that kind of striping that Planning Commission expressed might not do well for that particular area. Then the second item, number 3, you'll notice that there's a tree preservation area that the applicant actually put into their site plans, which is a little bit different than our perimeter planting one, but in order to try to preserve those trees, they proposed a 15-foot protection preservation area in back of our right-of-way, and then there's a sidewalk that gets in close proximity to that. And then in looking at, with Brad in our landscape area, he was saying that it still looks like that sidewalk may be too close to the trees on that first bank of units. So staff wrote this in a fashion that we didn't have the information at the time whether or not other types of modifications could be made to continue to protect those trees. And we believe that in talking with the applicant, maybe the only way we can kind of guarantee that would be working with an arborist and a preservation plan, because it's just very different with the grade changes and the fill and those kinds of suggestions. But we think that as it's written, it does allow for some of those things to be worked out. And then the last one, as was mentioned earlier, the HVAC units, when we looked at it with our building codes, that bedroom window could not be blocked for fire egress. And that's when we looked at those other options. But what we did hear from the Planning Commission at last meeting was you preferred to have them on the ground rather than above the units. And I believe the applicant's going to talk a little bit, wanted to talk about that a little bit further. But in looking at it, staff was trying to understand how that would impact if they were ground-mounted on the sides, because what I think I heard Planning Commission say is that you wanted them on the sides, not in the front, which I think previous versions, they were in the front. And talking to our Building Codes Department, it is a possible thing to do, but it would potentially cause a little bit more separation needed between the buildings, because now you're adding a 3-foot by 3-foot HVAC unit to bank in between those buildings. So staff wrote that in anticipation, if that's where the commission wanted to go, that could be still again worked out, because we hadn't seen a revised site plan layout for that. And then just lastly, we wanted to clarify that our understanding is this is an HPR. If it was not an HPR townhomes, our code, building codes actually are a little bit different and require fire sprinklering throughout the entire building. So we just wanted to make sure everybody was on that same page. And those were the only items that staff had addressed on the project. So if you have any other questions for staff, but I believe the applicant wanted to talk a little bit more about the HVAC component.
Any question for Ms. Smith from the Planning Commission? All right. Does the applicant wish to come forward?
So I think,
You will state your name and,
Andrew Neal, I work with Legacy South.
all right, thank you.
I'm sorry. I think that seems like the main, if not the only concern here is the positioning of the HVAC units. And I understand the Planning Commission's hesitancy to allow the above the garage placement, given the fact that Murfreesboro seems to have little to no experience with that. We are doing it on 150 plus townhomes in Nashville right now. And there are probably thousands of townhomes being built, at least hundreds of townhomes being built in central Tennessee with that feature. And honestly, we don't love HVAC units above garages for any particular reason. It's just this site, in order to get the density that we had approved in the 2020 approval, it's the only place they can go now that they can't go in front of the bedrooms. If they go on the sides of the buildings, as Planning Commission has requested, we'll lose 5 or 6 units, which it makes the project financially unfeasible from our perspective, with kind of the difficulties that we feel like we're going to go into economically for the next couple of years. So I don't really think that we can kind of budge on moving those down to the sides of the buildings. We're going to have to keep them above the garages. So happy to answer any questions about that or how exactly we're going to accomplish that, but we're going to have to stand firm on that point.
So you're not going to be able to answer this question, so this may be a question for staff, but I don't know the last time staff has gone to the Boulevard to eat, and those townhomes that are directly adjacent to that development, they seem to have the curb that we're talking about. It would just be interesting to know what the difference is in the distance, whether there is no distance between each townhome. However, there is the ability to put the unit between each, the HVAC unit between each unit, and it's got 2 black pillars right there. It's got the curbing that we talked about last week. I can't imagine the width of that being any different than this project, but I could be very wrong. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about, but I haven't measured or.
Okay.
If I can ask a clarifying question, we do have the authority to deny this based on the HVAC, right, Council?
I think that's a close question.
I mean, it's one of the 3 items that we talked about before, or
It
if
is.
we
It's a big
can't,
item.
the way I look at it, if we don't, then we don't have any standing at all with any of the 3.
If we don't, then what's the point of the Planning Commission?
Exactly, yeah. Or this discussion.
How wide are these curbs between the that separate each unit's parking spots?
So we're talking about 2 feet?
We're talking about split systems, not package units, right?
Yes. I mean, they'd be together, the 2 of them, probably
If you lined them up
60
vertical,
inches wide.
If you lined them up like that instead of side by side, so they're sitting in front of each other, not beside each other, and extended the parking out 5 foot total or 6 foot total, so 3 foot on each side of the parking garage. Could you fit 2 vertically on that concrete pad and just run the copper into the units? Because a split system's not, a condensing unit for a split system's not that wide. So if you extended the parking a little bit.
Exactly what I'm talking about.
I'm not that. My name's Bill Huddleston with Huddleston Steel Engineering. My wife tells me I'm not a great driver. I think I'm pretty good, but if we put them there, they're going to get hit all the time.
I don't see any damage to this one. Boulevard. That's what you're referring to, right?
No, I'm right here. If we.
No, but you're referring to putting them in between the garages, Sean?
But he's talking about 2 units.
On the concrete curves,
Okay, but 2 stacked.
going towards the, my wife would hit them, so.
If I could say another couple of things, the last thing we want you to do is feel like we've put you in a box. We don't want to do that. I appreciate all Mr. Ives' work and research. I think he's spot on with what he told you. Last time, we had a lot of discussion about this project, and it was a lot of discussion that you normally have on PRDs. But I want to point out again, this is not a PRD. This is straight bulk zoning and straight site plan approval. We're zoned for apartments here. I mean, we could put apartment buildings on this if we wanted to, but we don't want to. So I want to reiterate what Mr. Ives said as far as the criteria for Planning Commission site plan review. He says that you can have the developer additionally buffer, arrange structures, and meet other conditions of approval in order to mitigate any adverse impact that might affect the adjacent homes. Where we have these HVAC structures now, they're all interior to the site. Nobody adjacent to us is going to see them. If we put them on the sides of the buildings, which we can't because that's where the water vaults go, but if we put them on the sides of the buildings, then it would be seen by neighbors. So we're following the letter of your rules here.
So I would ask the question again, why are we having this conversation? If we can't deny it based upon the 3 items in question, I mean.
Deny it.
I'm not saying that it can't be denied. I'm saying that this is fuzzy enough that I can't give you an answer to that. And because this is, I still believe, an unusual situation. And yes, you can deny it based on the air conditioners. If they elect to file a suit, I can't guarantee we'll win. We might. I'm not going to say we'll lose, and I think we can argue it with a straight face that it's valid considerations, but I cannot guarantee you in any litigation, but especially in this one, I think it's a close question, and denying based on the air conditioning has risk. More so than the normal amount of risk when there's an issue in front of you folks. And that's partly because of the vesting law, but not totally, because of the interplay between the city ordinances that talk about de minimis changes and significant changes. Well, that's still there, but how that will stand up against the state vesting statute, I can't tell you. And again, there's been no cases under the vesting law of any kind, so it's difficult to project how a court would look at some of those. I can say in one respect that I think over the last quite a few years, our legislature has leaned more toward the rights of the landowners and developers and builders than they have toward the rights of the cities to control them.
Mr. Ives, can I ask a clarifying question to Ms. Smith briefly? Just want to confirm, the original site plan from 2020 prior to the litigation with the association, where were the HVAC units?
HVAC units were in front
On
of
the
the
ground.
units actually facing the rights of way.
So they were on the ground?
They were on the ground, and they basically had a screen wall trying to be placed in front of them.
Well,
Codes won't allow it.
right.
Yeah.
But that placement was overridden by codes.
Yeah, and David, as we've talked about, as lawyers, all we can do is advise our client. And Mr. Ives and Roman here, which I don't know your last name, Roman.
That's okay, it's Hankins.
Hank, that's right.
But you can call me Roman. That's
Roman's good, yeah. And
Mr. Ives is the only one that needs that level of respect.
It's the white
My
hair.
ego is kind of sensitive. I have to have that, yes.
They've advised us that there's risk, and part of serving on the Planning Commission is risk and assessing the risk, and I am not in support of the HVAC units as proposed. So, anybody else have thoughts, or I'm going to make a motion to deny?
Mr. Ives?
Sir.
Does the Planning Commission need to enumerate the adverse effects that we're going to have on the surrounding single-family houses in order to deny under the provision that you read earlier?
No, the Planning Commission has discretion.
Sorry, wrong one. At looking at, I don't see anything requiring that to be enumerated, requiring that.
So the Planning Commission can deny a by right zoning project without any specific adverse effects on the neighbors being listed?
The only thing that's required is that the amendment may be denied based on a written finding. And the written findings, as we've always done them, is in the minutes that are approved. A written finding that the amendment does one of those things. We are so that's all that it has to have. It doesn't have to have an enumeration, specific enumeration of what the Planning Commission feels is being the negative effect on the adjacent properties.
Another question. I think that provision refers to multifamily projects next to single-family houses. Are we defining this project as multifamily for these purposes? Because as Ms. Smith pointed out earlier, it's an HPR attached single-family product. They're individually platted.
We differentiated in a zoning ordinance amendment that townhomes are classified as single-family attached.
It's going to be a long one.
Under the vesting statute, the Planning Commission has to make a determination with a written finding, and that's all.
I'm sorry, I wasn't referring to the vesting, I was referring to the zoning provision letter. I forget what section number, it was letter F that you read earlier about the negative effects on neighboring single families. And I believe it says multifamily, industrial, commercial.
May I?
Sure, go ahead, Brian.
Told myself I wouldn't say anything, but going to. I don't think the HVACs bother me. Put them wherever. It's fine. The one thing that I think that changed was the buffer in the new plan.
The buffer of?
The
You're referring to the trees? Yeah, along Forest Point.
right. So that's the main. To me, that's the main issue, because that's a change that was made as a result of the lawsuit and not having the rights of way.
From what I understand, I'm not sure that the tree preservation is a planning commission issue. It's a problem for us if we kill those trees, because we'll be in trouble with the HOA under our settlement agreement. So we're incentivized to do whatever we can to make sure those trees stay alive. Otherwise, we're going to see ourselves back in court again, probably. But I'm not sure, maybe another question for Mr. Ives, whether that's a planning commission issue or not. And I appreciate y'all looking out for us and telling us that the sidewalk was a little bit too close and we might kill the trees, but we've moved it and we can't really move it anymore.
Mr. Ives, did you read the section? He's
Give me
referring
1 minute,
to.
please.
7A.
And I don't know whether it's you actually kill the trees or not, just what the rules are around the buffer.
I think that the rule is that it has to be outside the drip line, and I'm pretty confident that we're now outside the drip line of the trees.
No, I'm still looking at where, because put something about location in the utilities, but the location of the HVAC units as a site plan issue.
I'm assuming you, as the applicant, are not wanting to defer this so that we could try to figure out some of the answers to your questions?
No.
Otherwise, my motion to deny is still on the table.
Well, I'd like to hear some of the answers.
Agreed.
Before we vote.
Tell a joke. You're the new guy. Tell a joke.
Your first meeting, you get to just end it.
Hey, Mr. Halliburton, if Planning Commission finds it appropriate, this may be a good opportunity for a recess,
Okay.
so as to avoid prolonged uncomfortable silence.
All right. I'll make a motion, we recess and give them ample opportunity to see if they can give us some answers. We'll recess the meeting until we give them an opportunity.
These lights always this bright and hot.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, we will reconvene, and Mr. Ives or
The question I believe that I'm going to answer is what gives the Planning Commission authority to look at the location of the HVAC units on, to be above ground or above the garage in the back of the units. Section K of Section 7, and then subsection K about amendments, talks about substantial deviations. And looking at this site plan under the zoning ordinance, if a proposed amendment deviates substantially, then it comes back to the Planning Commission. And one of the is the relocation of any structure, and if the development is less than 8 acres, and this one's, I believe, a little over 4.5 acres, less than 8 for sure. So the relocation of any structure more than 5 feet from where it was in the first place. I believe that these HVAC units qualify as structures under the zoning ordinance, and they've certainly been moved more than that. Another point that brought this back to the Planning Commission in the first place is the fact that the accesses were materially changed from what they were in the first plan. So this couldn't have been administratively approved. It had to come back to the site plan for site plan review. And I believe that the accesses and those that are there are acceptable, satisfactory to staff and Planning Commission. But in fact, there's relocated structures, and that brings it back to the Planning Commission for approval, and I believe the Planning Commission has the authority to approve or deny those relocations. And it sounds as though at least part of Planning Commission is not in favor of the relocating those units to be elevated at the rear of the buildings.
So that sounds like it has to do with the vesting or non-vesting of the project.
No, this is the zoning ordinance.
But I'm not sure I understand how that has relevance to what we're talking about adverse impacts on single-family neighborhoods adjacent to multifamily development. First of all, I don't think that we've shown that there are adverse impacts. Second of all, my question on whether this is a multifamily development or not is still not answered.
Well, as Matthew said, under the zoning ordinance, under our current zoning ordinance, I believe this is classified as a single-family attached dwelling and not as a multifamily development, assuming that the HPR plat is put in place, which I understand you all have said you plan to do.
It will be. It is
assuming
not
it will
yet,
be,
but-
then yeah, then it would qualify as a single-family, but still under our zoning ordinance, when it comes back, because of the changes, comes back to Planning Commission for review. And that's one of the location of those, just the start of the general site plan review, the location of structures and accessory structures, including where the HVAC units are placed, is something that Planning Commission looks at as site plan review. And they were approved in the past to go in front of the house, in front of the unit, in front of the dwelling units. That can't be done, and I expect it would be very impractical to use that room as something other than a bedroom, the way these units are structured. But if it's a bedroom, then the units can't go there, and so where do they go? And at least one member of the Planning Commission is not willing to have them elevated at the back, at the rear of the structure, rear of the units.
Has the Planning Commission ever defined an HVAC unit as a structure in the past?
I doubt that issue has come up, because where they get placed is something that's looked at, I think, in pretty much every site plan, including single-family detached houses, where they get placed is part of the site plan review.
Mr. Ives, you agree that it's your legal opinion that HVAC units are considered structures?
I believe they're.
Okay, then that's the only opinion that's relevant here.
I believe that they are under our zoning ordinance definitions.
Okay, I'd like to go find that out for myself. I think that we've made our position clear. Y'all have made your position clear. Bill did tell me that it might be valuable to some of you if we agree to hire an arborist to come out and look at where we're going to put the sidewalk relative to the trees on Forest Point Drive. More than willing to do that. The issue with the striping, I think we've resolved. The HVAC, we can't acquiesce on that. So I don't think I really have much more to say. If anybody else does, I doubt Mr. Ives does either.
Well, we have a motion on the table, so we'll move forward with that unless there's other comments that need to be made by the Planning Commission.
Are you saying you wanted to look more into that? Or are you wanting to defer so you can look more into that position?
No.
Or you want a decision?
Mr. Wright, if you don't mind, can you pull your microphone a little bit closer to you so our
Sure. Sorry,
audio
I had a
picks
Rick
it up?
moment.
Thank you.
Just push that a little bit.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor to deny this site plan. Is there a second? Does the chair have a right to second? I'm not a,
Give us a shorter minute.
okay.
I think the chair does.
We really need the whole commission.
Yeah.
Where's the rest of the commission?
Yeah.
Based on.
Well, you can do that because she just motioned to deny, so she didn't give a reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Our local rules of procedure for the Planning Commission provides in Article 14, Roman numeral 14, Section 3, that the chair, vice chair, and/or chair pro tem may make, second, and discuss motions.
I'll make a second to that motion. So we have a motion and a second to deny. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
So we have 3 ayes and 1 no. So the motion to deny has passed. So we'll move on to the next item of old business, or do we?
Which is the Bellwood Church, which is the same
Okay,
project.
all right. So we don't need to address the next item?
I would assume that they'd probably need to have a motion on it as well, Mr. Ives. It would be a moot point, but with the Lytle Creek townhomes,
Right, it would be,
but I would assume we would still need a motion to tie up the loose end.
unless the applicant elects to withdraw the second item, then yes, we should have a motion.
Do you wish to withdraw?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, then we will move on to GDO. On motion, the first item of business under that part of our agenda is Ascension St. Thomas ICU addition, final design and site plan review of 54,747 square feet, addition on 68.5 acres, zoned L1, GDO3, and PSO located at 1700 Medical Center Parkway. Middle Tennessee Medical Center is the developer. Margaret Ann.
Good evening.
Yes, it's almost there.
Almost. Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
Yeah.
I'm not queued up here, so I'm trying to pull up the maps. But what we have today is an item for final design review and site plan approval for the Ascension St. Thomas ICU addition. This addition is to the existing building, and it is a new structure that will, as you know, there are several projects underway, including plans to construct a multi-level parking structure. This project is for an expansion of the intensive care unit and creates an ambulatory waiting area on the ground floor, and essentially that's an area beneath the structure that's covered where ambulances and responders can spend some time waiting until they are needed. The addition also includes approximately 27,000 square feet on the first floor and 13,000 square feet on the second, with a third being almost 15,000 square feet. I don't know what happened here. But the existing development complies with the Gateway Streetscape Master Plan already because the right-of-way improvements have been installed. And so no new infrastructure is needed for the Gateway Streetscape Master Plan. The plan does relocate some of the existing formal open space that was master planned as a part of this development. And so that is being relocated within the disturbed area. The site does provide the minimum separation required between the building and parking, as well as the separation between parking and adjacent properties. Good gracious. We discussed this item last month in September for initial design review, and in initial design review went through several items of the design that do not meet our either GDO or design guideline standards. And the Planning Commission does have the ability to provide some relief to some of those standards that I had stated in the initial design review. And so here's the map. I finally got there. Shows the existing building, and the site shows the area of the addition, which will be there. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea. The materials proposed are on the board that I can pass around. I did pass them around last month, but I'll be glad to do that again. Several of the brick choices are the same that are on the existing hospital and on the garage, so I do have a tone that matches what's proposed already. The design team is here to represent their project. I think that the screen on the image gives the best view. Here is the addition, with the faded parts of the image being what is existing. Go ahead and let them come up. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Otherwise, if you do decide to approve this, we would ask that you do that subject to all staff comments.
Good morning. Good afternoon, actually. That's how many cups of coffee I need. I'm Clint Harris, by the way, with Gresham Smith, architect for the project. Along with us is Rob Whitson, civil engineer, and David Campbell, representing the hospital. He works with MedExcel. So I'm happy to discuss anything further here. Is there anything specific you would like for us to discuss, since this is the second time we've discussed?
If I can clarify, in reference to the photo that you showed me, Mr. Campbell, is that metal?
Yeah, but another issue is this is actually an old rendering.
If you don't mind, get to the mic so we can.
Sorry about that. Yes, that is metal covering an air handler for the 8th floor. What the rendering we have here is actually we've reduced that screen wall and we brought it in and shortened it. So that way, the perspective that Clint has on a rendering show that you won't be able to see it.
Okay, well, for the record, I feel a lot better.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, that's why I was confused. It's like, I'm pretty sure that's not it shouldn't be an issue anymore, but all right.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any other discussion. I think I was the only one that had a problem with it at the last meeting, so. Sorry, boys.
No other questions. Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion, a second for approval. And it's subject to staff comments.
Subject to all staff.
Absolutely, it is.
Yes. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
The next item on the GDO portion of our agenda is Clary Park, Lot 14, Town Place Hotel, final design and site plan review of a 67,255 square foot hotel located on 2.3 acres, zone commercial highway in GDO 1, located along Robbie Corlew Lane, Chartwell Hospitality Developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you very much. This next item is final design and site plan review for a Town Place Hotel, which is proposed to be on Lot 14 within the Clary Park Master Plan development. The Clary Park Master Plan area has two zonings. Some of it zoned PUD, Plan Unit District, and some is zoned CH. You may recall it was previously zoned mixed use, but that changed to CH. All the property is located within Gateway Design Overlay District, and this portion is located in the GDO 1. The plans are for a Town Place Hotel, as I mentioned, which have 120 rooms, or propose to have 120 rooms. They do orient the front of the structure toward Robbie Corlew, which is a street that's currently under construction but doesn't exist. So if you've been out there, you wouldn't have seen it, but if you're looking on the map, it's this street here. So the hotel will actually, I'm getting better at that, front along that future right-of-way. The right-of-way is under construction by the development team currently, which is Hines. However, this application is by the builder of this Lot 14, Chartwell Hospitality. Just behind this property is the multifamily apartments that were approved as part of the PUD. And this plan does have a formal open space area, which includes a pool, pergola, outdoor seating, pedestrian scale lighting, and a fire pit that provides some nighttime ambiance in that formal open space. It does link to the linear park, which also runs along Robbie Corlew Lane, and there are comments in the staff comments regarding the standards that we expect. So, and of course, in the Gateway Streetscape Master Plan applies. And typically, we rely on the builder to install all elements of the Gateway Streetscape Master Plan. In this instance, there's a linear park and the Gateway Streetscape Master Plan that apply. Some of those elements are being constructed by the developer, some by the builder. In any case, the certificate of occupancy for this lot will only be issued upon confirmation that those required elements are in place. And so I know that there's multiple people doing the work. However, all parties involved understand that the Gateway Streetscape Master Plan is required, and that the certificate of occupancy for any of these lots will depend on those elements being installed. Robbie Corlew is a local street, but as I mentioned, I've got a couple images that show what it will look like in front of this. There we are, in front of the building. So you can see there's the linear park that runs along the north side, and the north side is where we are. You considered this item for initial design review at the September meeting, and I think the architecture of the building was well received. Of course, if you have any additional comments regarding the architecture, or if there are elements of the site plan you'd like us to discuss further, we'll be glad to do that. Representatives of the team are here, and if you have any questions, they'll be glad to come up and discuss that with you. And here is a layout of the site plan. There are shared access drives to that public right-of-way, which we've made sure with the master plan to site those, and with each building or each lot, we're making sure that they are being addressed and that shared access is being incorporated into the design to reduce the impact on the public rights-of-way. If you do elect to approve this today, we would ask that you make it subject to all staff comments.
Thanks, Margaret. And anybody on the Planning Commission have questions for Ms. Green? Does the applicant have anything to add?
Mr. Parker's the civil engineer.
Good afternoon, Jack Parker with Catalyst Design Group, civil engineer. I don't have anything to add, but we'll be glad to answer any questions that commissioners may have.
All right. Any questions from the Planning Commission?
None.
Thank you. All right. Any discussion? Otherwise, do we have a motion one way or the other?
I'll make a motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That application passes. Moving on to the next item under GDO, Clary Park Lot 8, Firebirds, final design and site plan review of a 6,041 square foot restaurant on 1.8 acres zone commercial highway in GDO 1 located along Medical Center Parkway, Honey Locust Trail, and Robbie Corlew Lane. Firebirds Wood-Fired Grill is the developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you again. This next item is another final design and site plan review item for a future restaurant proposed to be located on Lot 8 of the Clary Park Master Plan. As I mentioned, the Clary Park development is zoned PUD and CH, and this is on one of the CH properties. It's also located within the Gateway Design Overlay District. The proposed restaurant is about 6,000 square feet, just a little over 6,000 square feet, and it does include an outdoor dining area. The lot is unique because it has 3 front property lines. So there is a front property line along Medical Center Parkway, which is the major arterial, Honey Locust Trail, and Robbie Corlew Lane, which are local streets. The gateway does require four-sided architecture and the site to be designed on all four sides. However, there's an elevated standard for fronts, and so the opportunity with this lot has been to make sure to address all three fronts of the building. And then, of course, the property line it shares with the adjacent parcel is a side property line. The structure is oriented toward Medical Center Parkway since it's the street with the highest functioning classification as it's a major arterial. The outdoor dining area is located between the structure and Honey Locust Trail. And then the service area is between the structure and Robbie Corlew Lane. I think part of the struggle here was you do need a back of house of restaurant, but you want to make sure that the design is really accommodating the standards in the gateway and standards in the design guidelines. And so that's what they've hoped to do. We did look closely at the parking, and the plans do have a maximum amount of seats provided in the restaurant. In our zoning ordinance, parking is based on either square feet or the number of seats, whichever number is greater, and in this instance, the greater number is seats. The zoning ordinance also requires there to be parking for any outdoor dining areas. So there are 34 seats in the outdoor dining area, and a maximum of 171 seats within the restaurant. The zoning ordinance also specifically eliminates any parking spaces that are restricted for to-go or pickup spaces. So if you saw an Uber Eats space or a to-go only space, those can't count toward your minimum parking requirements per zoning ordinance. I think that was an update probably done in 2017. And they are proposing 4 to-go spaces near a door along Honey Locust. However, those spaces are not included in the calculation. I just wanted to share the parking with you because I know restaurants have opportunities around their parking. The site does require, or does provide, the minimum separations that are required in the gateway, and it is responsible for installing gateway streetscape elements along 3 rights-of-way because it does have frontage along 3 streets. Some of those are being installed by the developer, some by the builder. Same situation with the hotel. The certificate of occupancy for this lot depends on those elements being installed. The gateway streetscape master plan also requires a decorative crosswalk at signalized intersections, and one lot on each corner is responsible for either constructing that or paying fees in lieu of construction, with the city engineer constructing it later. And in this instance, the city engineer will probably accept fees in lieu of construction with the repaving and the rework of Med Center that's anticipated. The street trees, irrigation, back of curb, sidewalks, and pedestrian scale streetlights are shown on the plans. The Planning Commission discussed the architecture at initial design review. Of particular interest was a new material that we were unfamiliar with, called, find it in my notes. It's a dehydrated wood. Thermery. And so I think Mr. Russell had asked under other business for us to consider how we present these new materials to the Planning Commission and consider asking the applicants for additional information. So after the Planning Commission meeting, I think after this item was over, the design team headed back to their out-of-town location, and I forwarded a link to the Planning Commission meeting other business and asked them to listen to the conversation under other business since it happened at the end of the agenda, and asked them to come prepared today to provide any additional information regarding the Thermery product that they're proposing. One of Mr. Russell's points was, what is the primary material of this building? And I shared at initial design review that the ordinance requires brick, stone, and rock as the primary material in the gateway. And by primary, we use percentages, and we use the way the building projects or speaks to the street. And so this building is mostly brick, stone, or rock, but they are using several secondary or tertiary materials, with Thermery being one of those. And so in just a moment, I'll invite the design team up to provide the additional information regarding the Thermery product that is being proposed in limited areas on the building, but also within that screen wall that's between Robbie Corlew and this building, the front that is actually the service area. As far as the site, I mentioned they are meeting our parking standards. They're designed with the separations that require sidewalks that link to the public network and also including some of those streetscape elements. We believe that the site plan is in relatively good order. Would ask that your approvals be subject to any staff comments, but if you have time, I think the representative of the owner would like to present additional information on the Thermery product.
Would be great.
Thank you, Ms. Green. I'm Matt Taylor of SEC here in town. I've got my client with me as well. We did forward over to Ms. Green some warranty information, some additional spec materials in regards to the Thermery. Just a few of the highlights I will say are it does come with a 20-year manufacturer's warranty. It also, the way it shows up, it is finished on all 6 sides of the material. It is a penetrating oil that comes pre-finished from the factory, and then you can re-oil it or you can let it silver. My client prefers to let it silver, thinks it brings a character. I think we described that as akin to a patina last time we were here. So it is a quality material. It's not an effort to use a cheap material. It's an effort to use a material we were already using for some finishes and some trim areas to meet the ordinance's requirements for the void space ratio. So hopefully that answers any concerns that you have. Be happy to answer anything else.
Any talk of the Fire NATO this time?
I've been to a Firebirds, and I don't remember the Fire NATO, so I'm a little disappointed in myself, but I do look forward to coming back for that.
We need a road trip to Memphis to see the Fire NATOs in person.
Fire NATO at my house. If there are no questions, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Thank you.
Subject to all staff comments.
Second.
All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Seeing none, that application passes. So moving on to the next application, Clary Park, Lot 2, a 7-Eleven. Final design and site plan review of a 5,300 square foot convenience store with 3,333 square feet gasoline canopy on 1.8 acres zone commercial highway in GDO 1 located along Medical Center Parkway and Willow Trail. SE Murfreesboro Medical LLC is the developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you very much. Our final item under the Gateway Design Overlay portion of our agenda is for you to again consider final design and site plan approval for a project located within the Clary Park PUD master planned area. This is an out parcel that's zone CH. It's also located in the Gateway Design Overlay District. It has frontage along Medical Center Parkway and Willow Oak Trail. And the ortho maps we have don't show streets because they're currently under construction, but you can see the general location on the map that I have before you. The plan for this project, and I might just go to the site plan, you see it does have frontage along 3 streets as well, just like the project that we saw before. Med Center is the street to the south, and that's the street with a higher functioning classification. It's a major arterial. What you may notice is that the gasoline canopy is not located between the structure of Med Center, but actually the structure in the street to the north, which is the Robbie Corlew Lane that's currently under construction. And then to the west of the property is also another public right-of-way, but there is no structure. It's just the side of the building facing that area. So this lot had some of the very same opportunities that we just discussed regarding the Firebirds restaurant, meaning it has 3 front property lines, so that it really needs to speak to the street on all 3 sides, in addition to that gateway requirement of having 4-sided architecture. And so that's something that they've been working on as well. This plan, just like the other projects, is required and responsible for installing all of those Gateway Streetscape Master Plan improvements along the 3 public rights-of-way, and that includes the irrigation with repurified water to the back of curbs, street trees, pedestrian scale streetlights, and probably something else I'm forgetting. This site also has that crosswalk that's required because it's at a signalized intersection, and so the fees in lieu of construction would be something that our city engineer would be able to accept. In addition, this formal open space for this area, that has been a work in progress, and as much as up till today, I've been working with the design team who's really interested in meeting that standard and wanting to adhere to that cohesive design. Because there is a linear park on Robbie Corlew Lane, there's material and pavers and a certain aesthetic and design that's used in that park, and they're, with this project, wanting to extend that to the property, since the formal open space does go to the public rights-of-way, to add that visual connection in addition to other elements. But probably what you'd like me to get onto is the discussion that you had at initial design review, which wasn't last month, I believe it was the month before. That was really regarding this use and how the Planning Commission is considering it and regulating it regarding, just last year, we had a similar use where there are additional restrictions placed on signage or storage in front of windows. So very close to the site, there was another project that Mr. Taylor worked on that proposed a liquor store and gas station, and some of the things that were discussed were concerns that also applied to this property. So one of the things is that this is a store. It has 2 tenant spaces, but from my understanding, they have exterior doors, but also they are accessed through one side or the other. They're not closed off. But putting shelves against windows is not something that we would want to see in the gateway or outside the gateway, quite frankly. And sometimes what you see when you have shelves against windows are people just putting signs behind those shelves and doing window signs. Also, sometimes there are signs applied to windows, or there are that are maybe free by distributors of products that are sold here. And so the applicants volunteered to take a similar approach to the other gas station liquor store that we reviewed and place additional restrictive covenants on this lot that there's no real difference between GDO 3 signage and GDO 1 signage, although I think just informally we say similar to the GDO 3. The biggest difference is most of the parcels, not all the parcels in the GDO 3, actually have some restrictive covenants that are regulated by the DRC, which I think you're probably familiar with. Those restrictive covenants, those design standards are different than the zoning ordinance GDO 1 or GDO 3 standards. They do have a higher quality design. They are slightly more strict. And so the developer for this project, GBT, worked with Mr. Brick Murphy, who's here as well, to work with our legal staff to come up with the language for the restrictive covenants that would be similar to what we've worked on in the past, that would restrict the signage here to meeting those design criteria within the DRC. So you can say GDO 3, but I just wanted to make sure you understood that the sign ordinance really isn't the difference. It's those private restrictive covenants that are the DRC that are the big difference. And it took some education from Ms. Teresa Stevens on my part to understand that. I just assumed everything GDO 3 is different. And so there are some restrictive covenants that we have. I'm included in the packet for you if you'd like to look at them. And our legal team have also looked at them and believe that they accomplish the same thing that was done with the other lot. And so that is one component of I think what was being discussed. And then, let me make sure, I wrote the notes, signage restricted to GDO 3 standards, restriction on sign windows, so I think those restrictive covenants talk about the restrictions on window signs, and then update the signage package to comply with the GDO. So our zoning ordinance does ask for signage to be shown on buildings and monument signage to be provided with the Planning Commission review, which is early for some projects. People like to push that off on sign contractors later, but really it's important when you're considering the aesthetic of a design, since the gateway is an aesthetic overlay, to see the scale and the composition of signage and how it affects the architecture of the building. Sometimes it means increasing heights of areas above windows or changing materials. But the applicants really wanted to make sure that they worked on the signage package a little bit more to give you a true idea of what it may look like when they get to the point of pulling permits. And so what I have in your packet is I shared with Ms. Stevens, who looked at it, and there were some changes that she gave us, some comments regarding the signage package and what would be allowed. And so Mr. Murphy did us a favor of printing off some revisions that they believe comply with the ordinance, and I'll pass them out to you just so you can see them. And maybe while I'm passing these out, if you'd like to come up and present any additional information regarding the project or anything that I may have left out.
That's what the design came
And I'm here to answer questions.
Hi, my name is Morgan Salzman, and I'm with Kimley Horn, the civil engineer on the project. I don't have anything additional to present to you, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sorry, I was intended to be a little more organized.
We had some technology difficulties earlier today, so they did the old school thing, printing something off and bringing it to me in the office.
Margaret Ann, is this the same materials board we saw last time? Okay, no changes?
No.
Okay.
May I approach the chair?
Yeah.
That was such a lawyer thing to say, Brick. May I approach the bench? Officer Hill's outside on the phone, don't worry about it.
So is this,
The intent of the letter was to address staff comments one by one, and to show that we've addressed the signage comments. And so I normally am a little bit more organized, but my staff was having computer issues today, so we went old school and printed it out. So, but it's quite a bit of materials, including the restrictive covenants that are proposed, also some amended pages to the development booklet regarding the signage. There were some questions about the number of seats or tables in the restaurant, because that correlates with the parking requirements, and we responded to that. So it's quite a bit of material, and maybe not the most organized fashion, but the intent is to address any staff concerns, and if there's anything that staff feels like we've not addressed, we commit to do that.
And we typically see initial and final design review in back-to-back months, but initial design review was actually a couple months ago, and the applicant's been working with our legal team on fine-tuning the language in those restrictive covenants per the Planning Commission's direction.
so Mr. Ives, you are okay with, and it's similar, if not the same, restricted covenants as we passed with respects to the development in front of the Holiday Inn?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for the developer?
For the record, I probably should have stated my name. I'm Brick Murphy.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, any comments or motions with respects to this application?
Motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? This application passes. Thank you very much. Moving on to new business. This is scheduling a public hearing for what, November the 3rd? Second. The first item is a zoning application for approximately 34.2 acres located west of Memorial Boulevard to be rezoned from RS-15 to PRD, otherwise known as Northridge Park PRD. Gian, Homes as the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you. Our first item of new business is to request that you schedule a public hearing for this item. It is a rezoning request for 2 parcels, although it looks like 3 parcels, but one is just a separated parcel located along the west side of Memorial Boulevard. The properties are, of course, identified on the map. They're the blue color before you, and they're about 34.2 acres in size. The PRD program book is referred to as Northridge Park, and the applicant is Guillen Homes, which is a builder out of Texas. I don't believe we've worked with them before, but for the past, or in preparation of this packet, we've asked for some information and started a dialogue with them. This project is located adjacent to the Family Worship Center and is surrounded by single-family residential zoning, RS-15 on the north, west, and south sides. And those, of course, are the Regency Estates subdivision, Regency Park subdivision, and Palmer Heights subdivision. As I mentioned, they're all zoned RS-15, which is single-family residential district, with a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. This property actually has 3 zonings currently on it, or the 2 parcels that are the subject of this request are zoned RS-15, which is single-family residential district, with a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. But one of those parcels is also zoned CF and CH, and that's like a flagpole leading to Memorial Boulevard. And the request is not to change the zoning of those parcels, to leave them zoned CH and CF, as they do run along Memorial Boulevard, which is state highway and major arterial. And so it is limited to the areas in blue that you see. As far as an overview for Northridge Park, the proposed Northridge Park PRD, it is designed to be a single-family detached subdivision on the 34.2 acres. The plan shows a maximum of 96 single-family lots with a density of 2.8 dwelling units per acre. Each home is proposed on individual lots of record, and so like a traditional subdivision. And the developer has intention stated in the program book to establish a restriction that prohibits rentals for up to 2 years. The plan has stated that this will be all developed in one phase. A significant component of the plan that staff has shared with the design team is that connection to Memorial Boulevard, which is currently a signalized intersection. This leg happens to just be a driveway, but in the future, this development will be responsible for constructing and building a road all the way to Memorial Boulevard and participating in those improvements to the signal to make it signalized on all 4 sides. The reason for the PRD request is that the applicants would like to reduce the lot sizes. The zoning today is 15,000 square feet, and the plan shows a mixture of 10,000 square feet lots and 12,000 square foot lots. And the 12,000 square foot lots are proposed on the periphery, so adjacent to the existing 15,000 square foot lots, with the smaller lots on the interior. The plan commits to each single-family unit having a minimum of 2,350 square feet, and that's heated space, so exclusive of the garage, 3 bedrooms, and 2-car garages. During initial conversations, one of staff's concerns, is there something I need to?
No, you're
Okay.
fine.
Okay. One of staff's concerns was that the initial renderings had all front entry garages, but if you look at the existing established neighborhoods of Regency Park and Regency Estates and Palmer Heights, that's not the fabric that currently exists, so we challenged them to go back to the drawing board and really see what they can do to design these with side entry garages so that you avoid that snout house look. And so proposed in the plan are, of the 96 lots, 85 of them will be side entry and 11 are proposed to be front entry, which is about 11%, so staff was more comfortable with that number. We know that this, whatever develops here, is going to look different because, you know, it's 30 years later, give or take, but we really wanted to make sure that the fabric or some of the bulk standards kept in play. So when they were working to get those side entry garages, one of the most important factors to getting a side entry garage is having a lot that's wide enough so you can get in, swing into your garage. And so staff suggested, I think, that there may be opportunities to do reduced setbacks on the sides so that you can shift it to make sure to get that side entry garage, since we identified it as something important. Consistent with our development regulations and with all the years that I've worked with City of Murfreesboro, we asked the design team to take the dead-end streets that currently dead end into this property and incorporate them into the development. And so I anticipate, and there was a neighborhood meeting, and of course, we did hear this as well, that the existing neighbors who have a street that dead ends to this property may be concerned about this street extension. However, based on our development policies, we have asked for them to be extended, and I'll just draw a blue line here. Here. There's actually, let's see, and here. Those are all streets that currently dead end into the property, and so we've asked for them to design the plan to continue the street, particularly so they can get to that signalized intersection at Memorial Boulevard. And one of the things that we've asked for is to make sure that it's not a racetrack or drag strip straight through the property. And so there have been some, curves and bends and stop conditions where they can be. This road kind of does something to help with the view shed. But of course, this is a direct request from city staff, and I'm sure that during the public hearing, there'll be some people will come and speak regarding this, but I just wanted to be clear up front that we've shared that with neighbors, we've shared that with the design team, that this was a consistent message that we have in all of our development regulations and all of our conversations. The pattern book does commit to doing a traffic study, and I think that was a result of some of the conversation at the neighborhood meeting. They wanted to know how the traffic may impact their neighborhoods, because getting to the school system, there would be residents going through the neighborhood to get to the school system. So that's something that we will be awaiting. And then, let's see, one of the important factors of this plan is that each single-family lot is proposing to meet our parking standards. So our parking standards in our zoning ordinance say 4 parking spaces in the driveway exclusive of the garage, so not including the garage. I know you've gotten some applications recently where they wanted a reduction in the parking spaces and asked for the garages to be counted. In those instances, we have them record some restrictions on the use of the garage so that they can't use it for what a typical family may use. But in this case, the garage doesn't need to be restricted because they are providing those 4 spaces per lot. So I think that's a benefit with development in our community. And in stormwater and drainage, we noticed, just looking at the information and mapping that we have available, that there appeared to be some kind of something across this property. We didn't know if it was a blue line stream or water or wetlands, but we did ask for them to provide a hydrology determination or an HD report. And so that HD report was done. What needs to happen is it needs to be submitted to TDEC for review to see if they concur. But they did identify a wetlands on the property and then some water courses, but there was nothing about the property that meant that it couldn't be developed. Staff likes to bring this up as early as possible because you have in the past, of course, approved plan developments, and then more information and study will be done, and you realize you can't put lots where you thought you could before, and so we really wanted them to look at that as early as possible. This doesn't mean that everything's been looked at, but this is more front work than maybe has happened before, because we really wanted to avoid a situation where they'd have to come back in just 6 months and say, hey, we found out we've got wetlands everywhere. And so there is the HD report available for you to review. Plan developments allow for a project to be designed so that it can be tailored for the project. As such, there are exceptions that can be granted for the project. And in this case, let's see if I can get to the right page. They have asked for exceptions and listed them on page 19 of the program book, and they mostly have to do with bulk standards. So one is to reduce the front setback to 35 feet, from 35 feet to 25 feet for the house. So what that's saying is the house can be 25 feet, but the garage still has to be that 35 feet to maintain your 4 parking spaces. So it allows the house maybe to project into the front yard, but the garage still has to maintain that 35-foot setback. A reduction in the side setbacks from 10 feet to 5 feet, to increase the maximum permitted height from 35 feet to 40 feet. to decrease the lot width from 70 feet to 65 feet, and to increase the maximum lot coverage from 25% to 33%. So that's just looking at the impervious area on a lot. So those are the exceptions that have been requested. The existing future land use map does state that.
Margaret Ann, can I ask you a question? And I probably ought to know the answer to this, but when we talk about side setbacks and reducing it to 5 feet, and knowing that you were asking for side garage entry, is that 5-foot setback from the driveway or no?
That's the minimum building setback line, so it's only for the building structure itself. It's not for the pavement or concrete or asphalt. So it's, the house shifts basically 5 feet closer to one property line, so there can be additional space on the driveway side.
Ultimately, two driveways could be right next to each other?
Yes, they could be.
Okay.
I won't spend a lot of time on the future land use map other than to say that the proposed zoning change is consistent with both the existing future land use map and the proposed future land use map. Both recommend suburban style development, and so this fits within that context. The lot sizes can change within that suburban residential development, and so with these they're 10 and 12,000 square feet lots. There was a neighborhood meeting that was held at the Family Worship Center, and I can give you that date because I wrote it down. And it was a well-attended meeting, which I was glad to see. Apparently I can't find my date. But there was a neighborhood meeting already before this was submitted. And I expect that whenever you do have the public hearing, that there will be some participation at this time. We don't have anything else scheduled for November 2nd, so there is room for you to consider it if you're ready to move forward then. And then there's a PowerPoint, I think, Mr. Roundtree. He's got one. I don't know if he's excited about it, but let's see. Did you have questions, though, before I have him go through the project from me? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret Ann. Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. Appreciate the opportunity to kind of walk you through this. I'll be brief. I know it's been a long day already. As far as this development is concerned, I just want to bring a little background on Guillen Homes. Guillen Homes comes out of Dallas, and so it's been really interesting to work with them. In Dallas and Metro Dallas area, everything's frontage garages, which I think is really interesting. These are high-end homes, and they're all frontage garages. So they brought their kind of architectural character to Tennessee, and we were kind of shocked by it, but I think it's pretty interesting that that's kind of the trend that they're seeing in that metro area. As far as working with the staff, that was a major component. We originally had a few more houses, and they're all frontage, so we had 2 or 3 renditions of actually, we were at, how about 60% frontage, how about, 40% side, and then, we kind of went through multiple generations of design. And we came up with really what we thought was the max number of side entry garages. So there's only 11% garages, but I'll show you an example of each one. And most of you are familiar with this site. This is one of those really prized pieces of property that just pasture land that has RS-15 all around it and very close to the thoroughfare on Memorial Drive. So we feel like this is prime for development. Just some adjacent uses. There's a church, there's the Wilson Bank and Trust, it's right across the street on Memorial. The character of the homes, all the homes, I think some staff members live in close proximity. It's a really kind of ranch style, really nice homes, larger lots adjacent to the property. As far as development, as Margaret Ann mentioned, there's been a lot of work on road alignments, make sure our intersections are far enough apart between, where roads start and stop. But I want you to be aware that our neighborhood meeting was it was a really interesting meeting. It's probably the most well-attended neighborhood meeting I've ever been a part of. Very active, well-informed group. The church did a fantastic job hosting. It's hosted right at the church adjacent to the property. But one of the things we found out is that although it's a city goal to have cross connectivity, the neighbors weren't excited about it at all. So I think at our planning commission meeting, we just need to be prepared that they don't want it. It's really funny. They don't want a light to Memorial. They feel like it's going to be a cut through the Siegel. So we were kind of shocked by that. This is actually probably a good thing for them because it gives them more ways to get out of their neighborhood. But I just want you to be ready that they're going to come guns loaded. They want to take at least 2 or 3 of those out. So that was kind of an interesting development from the neighborhood meeting that I wasn't expecting, but it's something we need to be aware of. We have kept all the access points in place. That's one of our city mandates. And that's what they're designed for. Those stub streets are not basketball courts, but they're actually pass-throughs in the future. So they'll come with some concerns about that. These are the quality of the homes. This is really interesting. So often we find ourselves in all these compromising positions as planning's coming along. This is one where I'm like, I think we're really close to getting everything we could ask for. These are wonderful single-family homes, high-end homes. They start at $700,000. These are not low-end products. One of the concerns at the neighborhood meeting was whether property values would go down as a result of this development, and it was one of the,
Never heard that asked.
very seldom does that happen, but in this one, they may double their property value as a result of these homes. So gain comes in as a high-end product. Again, all these homes have a front entry component to them. If this was in Dallas, all those would be front entry garages. But as a result, to go into the side entry, we really have to do some manipulation with the plans, and that's why we're asking for that reduced side setback. It gives them the flexibility to allow these to work, and allowing us to have that reduced front setback allows the home still to take up, have a good street presentation, but gives them a little more flexibility on how that garage relates. So the 35-foot setback is for the garages, as was mentioned. And they're larger homes, so they're taking up a little bit more area than your traditional home. So that's where that 33% comes versus the 25%. But I think we'll be really happy with the end product of what they're proposing. So, and there's one that just shows you one with a front entry garage, but again, these are minimum 2,350 square feet, so they're big homes to begin with. And I think it's a great subdivision. So with that in mind, I just want to let you know that I'm here for any questions you may have. I did want to brief you that on the neighborhood meeting, we could probably expect some interesting conversations related to cross-circulation and traffic. That's going to be the primary. As far as the traffic study, we've committed to doing it. It's just one of those kind of studies where we're prescribing everything that's going to be asked of us as far as cross-connectivity, as far as making sure that intersection at Memorial is more than substantial to do the job for what this neighborhood's going to put on it. So this traffic study will be more just to kind of abate the neighbors' concerns. It's going to be hard to determine exactly how Siegel's traffic is going to be impacted by this, but they're convinced that it's going to be another way to get to Siegel High School. So just kind of know that's where that's going. So with that in mind, if you have any questions for me, be glad to answer them. Ian Holmes, representative, he'll be here for the public hearings, but he was fantastic. He did come to our neighborhood meeting. He really represented the product well, so I think we're in good hands on this one.
I'll make a couple comments. I think it's a great looking development. I also think that the people in Regency Park will probably use it as a cut through more than the neighborhood will use it to cut through Regency Park instead of having to go all the way to Regal to cut through. I'll even cut through it to go to my house, so it makes it convenient for me. So I think it's a good looking project. I move to set the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor for a public hearing on the November 2nd, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Set for November 2nd. The next item on public hearings is a zoning application for approximately 16.01 acres located at 285 North Rutherford Boulevard to be zoned PRD. All buy-in at Murfreesboro Apartments PRD, including a PRD amendment of approximately 11.7 acres, rezoning approximately 4.2 acres from RM16 to PRD, and rezoning 0.02 acres from CU to PRD. All buy-in of Murfreesboro LLC is the applicant. Ms. Smith.
Good afternoon, Commission. This is another item that we're looking at scheduling a public hearing for. We want to give a brief introduction about the project. You may recall a while back we had some projects that we referred to as bifurcation, but we don't use that technical term because it's very confusing to many people, and all it means is they're looking at taking an existing apartment complex, reorienting the interior doorways and walls to create more units, but less bedrooms, which is kind of an odd thought. But as we've looked at this particular project, our city council has already weighed in on their sewer variance for this, because what they have found on these types of projects is because they're reducing those 4-bedroom, 4-bath student housing units into more traditional 1-bedroom studio and 2-bedroom units, and keeping the 3 bedrooms that they have, is that it actually reduces our sewer loads. So that's kind of where they're looking at it from a sewer capacity issue. On this particular one, those increases, it's actually about almost a 20% reduction in their bathroom count, but it will actually go from 252 units, to 360. And so in looking at those particular units, in our zoning map, the reason why they're requesting the PRD is a portion of the property is already zoned PRD currently, but there is a portion that touches down onto Rutherford, very narrow strip, that's CU, and then a portion of it that is RM16. So when you look at those particular density and original approvals, that was a 15.74 units to the acre. The bifurcation, because we're using the term units, would actually go up to 22.48 units per the acre, but no additional floor space that we're actually adding on to the property. In looking at it, it does have existing sewer services, water services, and they would obviously add those water and lines for those additional units to be separately billed, but not increase any of the current metering for that particular project as our council has approved. This particular map shows kind of a little bit of, there we go, stormwater. This particular site, staff has been working a little bit longer than most because it actually has a porous asphalt paving, of which has been having some issues for maintenance and actually working through it. So the applicant's been working diligently to, what I'll say, work on initial mitigation measures, cleaning out pipes, making sure there's no clogs, if they need to dredge out something that's been backfilled, those kinds of things. But we were very concerned about it, so they did put together in our PRD book a mitigation plan that outlines those activities that they would do during the initial phase, and then they actually identified where they're having some existing issues, and actually currently they have a volleyball court off of the pool section that's actually pretty deep, that actually takes on a lot of the water during that period of time. But when you look at this particular map, and all the red lines, my understanding is those are the pipes that actually go in and through the site from those parking areas into their drainage systems. So we do believe that they can be worked through during their site plan review because that's when we get into construction details. But they are basically looking at multiple mitigation plans, and then what staff suggested in case those plans do not get us where we need to go. They do have an overage of about 33 surplus parking spaces that we asked them to put into their exceptions, even though, as long as they're meeting the parking standards, that's kind of a fail-safe that we believe will get us where we need to be at the end of the day as the project ensues. Now, what they did do is they provided for us, and I think in our staff report we stated we weren't sure how it was going to be laid out within each of the buildings, which ones would be, and I don't know what that one is. That's not mine. I was going to say, okay, that's why. I was going to say that was a new presentation. There we go. They did provide an additional slide for today to go over, and I will have Clyde go over those improvements that they're looking at adding to the site. But staff did look at interior connectivity, and you see these little green lines throughout the project. That's improvements to those connectivity points. Currently, there was a SEPTED report that was done on this a couple years back by our police department, and they did notice this area where you see this purple line. There's actually an existing fence that's not necessarily contiguous, but that's where they have a lot of the crime issues, is along those back units. And believe it or not, I didn't know it, but the gas station on the other side of the fence actually has a sidewalk that's constructed to the back side of this Unit K that provides direct access for the students to get to that convenience center without getting into their cars. So they don't have a problem with it. They said we just need to kind of corral and improve that connection point, probably increase the lighting, reduce the landscaping, make it very visible. But because they don't have sidewalks that go directly out to service that commercial project, we believe that with some of the improved connectivity within the site would take care of not having additional sidewalks added to the exterior, because again, this is a pre-existing project site. But as you can see, actually, the units are in these quadplexes that basically have one kitchen, 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, and there's 2 different options that they're looking at breaking it into. The one on the left would be 2 one-bedroom units. The one on the right would actually be a studio unit and a 2-bedroom unit. So with the modifications that they have proposed in the packet, and I'm just going to see, I was going to say I don't see that in, oh, there it is. So this shows you, so to the left of your screen, Alumni Drive, that's actually your north. So this is actually rotated up as far as the orientation. But they are looking where you see all the colorful plans. So for example, in this area, this delineates that there's basically 1 studio, 1 bedroom, and then the flip side on the other half of the unit. Let's see if I can clear. But when you're looking at the purple component and the orange, that represents those 1 bedroom, 1 bedroom, 1 bedroom alternatives. But again, looking at the overall, because they're reducing the bedroom count by 20%, that reduces the parking, and that's one of the reasons why they have surplus parking. And with that, last item is under our future land use map. You may have noticed that it's currently designated public institutional, and our proposed future land use map also shows it as that same institutional designation. And the reason for that is MTSU actually has a master plan that they show as a potential acquisition area, but the city is not aware of any imminent plans by MTSU to purchase the property, and we believe that given the fact that the improvements will reduce the impact to our sewer system, and it will also extend the useful life of the complex by probably 20 years, as well as improving some of the elements of going from student housing to more traditional housing where there's independent people that are responsible for their unit, not exiting, that a deviation would make sense from this future land use map, but we would ask that the Planning Commission deliberate on that during the public hearing. And with that, I will turn it over to Clyde Roundtree with the applicant, who will go over the components of the project.
Thank you, Holly. Again, Clyde Roundtree, Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'm also here with representatives from Albion themselves, if you need to speak to them. And I think Holly called it all buy-in. I like that, all buy-in. So with that in mind, I think just for clarification, the bifurcations are new. I'm sure a few of you have been exposed to them, but if you haven't, really what's happened in Murfreesboro, we were involved with the first one that maybe a year and a half ago, and I learned a ton. But it turns out that a lot of our apartments in Murfreesboro, as a result of lack of housing at MTSU, have become college apartments, and as a result, a lot of them were designed like dorm style, 4 bedrooms with 1 bathroom. And I have a few friends, but I'm not sure if I got 4 friends that I could live with. And so as a result, a lot of these apartments have people who end up getting 1 apartment, scaring off the other 3. So 1 apartment with 4 rooms is rented by 1 person. So what happens economically is all of a sudden these become in decline. And once they start going in decline, one of our first clients called it the death spiral. Once you start having that mechanism going, you have limited rent coming in, the buildings become poorly maintained, they become basically, they totally transform their population, and it just becomes a bad place to live. And it just, it really becomes a problem. So when the first one came in, they came in like knights in shining armor, because there was a real problem for us. We've got a moratorium on apartments, and here they come having a solution to make apartments more livable. And with our affordable housing issue in our town, this is a great thing. So I just want to comment and credit the companies that are coming in to do this. I think I would love to bend over backwards for them because I think they're really doing something that's really needed for our city, and I think they're doing a great job. And unlike the other ones I've been a part of, Albion's coming in for a full retrofit. They're not only doing the units that are being bifurcated, they're doing the whole development. So it needed a little updating, it needed a little facelift, and they're committed to that whole process. So knight in shining armor time too, because they're really going way above beyond what would probably be required for a normal bifurcation to make sure it's the best living possible for the residents. And as Holly mentioned, part of the strategy is that whenever you bifurcate and you change the unit mix, it just changes the population. So all of a sudden, these apartments become much more accessible to a wider variety of people. So you can have young families moving into them. You could have, newly married, first time, folks getting together, whatever. So I think it's really exciting because I think it's going to help us take the bad rap off of apartment complexes that really we have in this town. So that's a really positive thing. I want to just bring to your attention that one of the biggest issues, and we're working through this, but as Holly mentioned, stormwater is a real problem here in terms of there's a lot of pooling water. And there was a pervious solution that was originally approved with the site plan. It's a porous asphalt versus a porous concrete. Well, we believe that as a result of poor maintenance, there's been consistently siltation that's been happening in these porous areas. And so at one point, there was a recommendation of taking out all that porous asphalt. Let's take it out, redo it. Highly cost prohibitive, and really was going to change the whole dynamic of whether the deal could get done for them. So working with the city staff, the solution was let us try to mitigate the situation by basically vacuuming out, literally hiring a company to vacuum out all that porous asphalt to see if we can get it back to where it works effectively. The areas that are most prone towards this, there's some landscape areas that have no curbing, so a lot of that just migrates over to here. And if you can imagine a building in death spiral mode, they're not really worried about porous asphalt, they're worried about other things at a little higher priority. And so as a result of poor maintenance over time, we believe we have a solution that we can solve. They've already contracted with a vacuuming company. They've contracted to have all the pipelines, all the stormwater scoped to see if there's any kind of clogs. And we do have a solution with stormwater as far as where it goes now. We can enlarge that. We have the ability to enlarge that. So I think we have a solution for the primary concern that's been mentioned by the city staff. So we're excited about getting that moving forward. Albion's been working diligently on this process as well. So I just want you to know they're a cooperating team. I want to come in and do a wonderful job. They're doing quite a few projects in downtown Nashville as well. So with that in mind, I don't want to get into lots of detail. Holly mentioned most of it. We are, stormwater is a major concern that's being addressed. As far as some of the improvements, just so you can have a general idea, and a lot of this is kind of facelift. There's classic, the siding's been damaged, so there's going to be some improvement on siding. There's a lot of situations where, like we mentioned, where you have curb cuts and what are designed for drainage, but they're all silted in. Those will be improved on. Some of the amenities are tired and worn out, so we're going to upgrade the amenities. One of the exceptions we're asking for is the trash enclosures. Because of the scope and the size and how many there are, we're asking for the ones along the main right-of-way be masonry enclosures, and then the ones that are not on the main right-of-way to be enclosed either via landscaping or some sort of a fencing system, but not a full masonry system. And the city's allowed us to cluster them, so there's less of that expense as far as getting wrapped around, containment around all the units. But we're committed to screening them, but as far as masonry, we've asked for an exception on that, on the majority of the units, or the garbage units. As far as anything else, landscaping-wise, what we're running into a lot of these apartments is that they're older, so the landscaping's already kind of come and gone. All the foundation planting, all the things that would normally be required have already died out because they're apartments and they were poorly maintained. So we're asking that really from a landscaping standpoint, that we are asking to bring it up to TEP standards, that any kind of concerns over something being too tall or preventing visual lines, for safety purposes, we'll take care of those issues. It's got a real mature buffer around the majority of the property, but it's overgrown. So we're going to have to thin that out to make sure it's not a place where people can hide, where it'd be dangerous. But we're really not augmenting a lot of landscaping around the garbage enclosures. We are, and at the front entrance, but we're not going to go ahead and re-landscape the whole development. That's really not something we can do financially. But again, it's a mature development, a lot of shade, so there's a lot of issues with growing anything there now. they're going to improve the lighting, all the signage, the mail kiosk is going to need to be improved and expanded. But again, they're going at this thing guns loaded as far as making it as a nice facility as possible. I'm excited about what they're proposing. They've been great to work with. It's been a little bit of a hurdle getting through all the stormwater, but besides that, I'm excited about where it's heading. So if there's any questions you have for me or for the client, we're here available to answer any questions you may have. Rick Murphy's also here, who's also representing the client as well.
Clyde, the whole stormwater thing sounds like it's getting a lot of attention. Does that get resolved before they start revitalizing the buildings, or it would be in the same, it'll be arm in arm with the construction piece? The reason why I ask that is I could see, I guess if it doesn't work and you have to come up with an alternate solution, then does it become cost prohibitive to do the whole project? That's kind of my question. It's like, that looks to me like that needs to be resolved before they take the next step, or you already know what the next step is with this extra parking area, and you know what that cost is associated with whatever that resolution would be.
Ken, I think really where we're at is the first line of, the first thing we'd like to do is go ahead and see what we can do as far as restoring the proper operation of all the pervious paver.
Okay.
So if that doesn't work, then we have a phasing plan in terms of what parking lots to take down systematically to make sure. The biggest thing is the initial expense of taking it all out and trying to redo it. The second challenge is phasing it so they're not really disrupting the student population.
Right.
So they're having to kind of rotate that around. But they're asking for the ability to at least go after mitigating measures first and then evaluate that based on what the evaluations are, figuring out how to systematically approach resolving. Because at the end of the day, if there's 3 inches of water and you get out of your car, it's going to be hard to rent that apartment as well. So everyone has the same motivation. It's just a matter of how to get there and how quickly. They have every motivation to make it work as quickly as possible. We're under the assumption that we feel like it's going to be successful once it gets mitigated, because it's hard. When Holly saw it the first time, it looks like it's just eroded asphalt because it's so silty and it's so broken. But it's just really, it's all the silt that's floated on. You can't hardly tell what it is when you look at it. It just looks like something that's like just silt. So, but they're bringing a team in. They've already contracted with the professionals to come and clean all that, get the evaluations done. And then I think we're also committing to making a maintenance plan as well so that the city knows kind of what to expect as far as their mitigation measures if the initial ones don't work.
And I was just going to say, currently, we don't have a maintenance agreement on this. Normally, a brand-new project today would have a stormwater maintenance agreement, and so that's one thing that they are committed to getting under contract with the city for that, so that, it doesn't become something that 10 years later they're in the same predicament because of lack of maintenance. So we do feel with that, and I'll say the relief valve of if we do need to take any parking offline, I think originally they were anticipating it was going to, if they literally repaved everything, it was going to be $4 million to repave everything. And so, one, that's extremely cost prohibitive, but number two was, do you have enough green space that you can get drainage if those parking lots cannot drain? And so I think with there's really 3 prongs: maintenance first, dig more of what we already have, and then if those ones don't, last resort, take some additional offline. So we think with those 3 things we can get it to work, but I think the applicant has basically asked for phasing it, meaning not having it all at one time. And most of the time what we see with these bifurcation projects, they're usually a 2 to 3 year process because of just, kicking everybody out of a building at the same time, taking it offline. It usually takes a couple of cycles, and they're pretty well booked at this site because it's across from MTSU. So we think that with those 2 things that they'll be successful.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments for the applicant? And if there are none, do we have a motion to set a public hearing?
I'll make the motion to set the public hearing for November 2nd.
All right. We have a motion and a second from Mr. Prince.
I get no credit?
No, you don't. You've been making motions all night.
I know. Tell me about it. I'm exhausted. Pick up the slack. flag, gentlemen.
We have a motion and a second to set a public hearing for November 2nd. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, all right, we'll see y'all on November the 2nd.
Thank you so much, Commission.
All right, the next item under public hearing is a zoning application for approximately 1.6 acres located along Veterans Parkway to be zoned C8 simultaneous with annexation, 5.7 acres to be zoned PRD simultaneous with annexation, and to amend the existing villas at Veterans PRD zoning on 7.1 acres located along Franklin Road. Harney Homes is the applicant.
I'm going to go ahead and
sorry
pinch
about
it
that.
for Ms. Rush. Mr. Halliburton and members of the Planning Commission, I'll pinch it for Ms. Rush as she's unable to be here this afternoon. Our last public hearing that we have for you to set is for property that's located along the west side of Veterans Parkway and the north side of Franklin Road. You saw this same property on May the 4th for a public hearing and recommended approval to the City Council. That particular plan was in a little bit different form. The existing PRD, and if we could get the cable department to put my computer up on the screen for the planning commissioners. So this is the Villas at Veterans PRD. And so the Villas at Veterans PRD was a townhome development that was approved back in 2021. Since that time, Mr. Harney, the developer, has put additional property to the north under contract. His initial proposal that went before the Planning Commission back in the springtime was in addition to the townhomes, to build single-family detached homes also as a part of the horizontal property regime. So in other words, just like the townhomes, the buildings themselves would be sold individually, but everything outside of the buildings would be common area. The front portion of the property along Veterans Parkway was requested to be zoned for commercial highway with a proposed restaurant use there. That has not changed. The same land area that was proposed to be zoned commercial highway is still proposed to be zoned commercial highway today. When the request that you saw back in the spring got to council in June, and if you'll recall, when this went before you in May, there were some issues with the elevations for the single-family detached component, and the applicant was never able to get those issues worked out. We went ahead and scheduled the public hearing before the City Council with the expectation that the applicant would have revised elevations to us for the single-family detached homes by that time. The elevations that he provided still did not address the concerns of the Planning Commission and the planning staff. So at that time, the City Council moved forward with a vote to approve the annexation of the parcel that's in the orange and red on the map before you, but moved to defer the zoning. And at that time, the City Council discussed concerns that they had regarding the condition that the single-family detached homes were in as they were presented to Council. I think Council looked at the elevations of the single-family detached homes, and Mr. Wright, if I'm putting words in y'all's mouth, correct me, but I believe that based upon the elevations that were presented, the City Council did not feel comfortable with moving forward with the single-family detached portion of the development. And I think that that what they preferred to see was a more cohesive development, and I think that there was a little bit of incongruity between the single-family detached portion of the development and the townhomes. So the applicant went back to the drawing board and has submitted a revised plan showing all single-family attached product. So a continuation of the townhouse product for the property. So the property in the red is proposed to be added to the property in the turquoise for a total of about 13 acres of townhouses, and they would all be consistent with the townhouse product that was approved back in 2021 for the area in the turquoise, bringing the total land area, or excuse me, the total density up to 91 townhouse units for this development. And as I mentioned, the area in the orange would still be proposed to be zoned commercial highway. The development plan, Mr. Taylor will have a few words to say in just a moment, but the development plan still includes the public right-of-way that would add a fourth leg to the intersection at the traffic signal that is right in front of the Kroger. So I think we see that as a benefit to the development, having that fourth leg and giving folks an opportunity to have a public street network to get down to Franklin Road, other than adding additional traffic to the intersection of Franklin and Veterans. They're also showing stubs to the north and to the west for future connectivity as well, which we always like to see that good connectivity. And there are properties in the area to the north and to the west that we expect to see under redevelopment at some point in the future where we would want that connectivity. So the applicant submitted this and is requesting consideration for a public hearing. If you choose to move forward scheduling a public hearing, we would recommend placing this as the third and final item on the November 2nd Planning Commission agenda. And I'd like to invite Mr. Taylor up to say a few words about his and his client's proposal, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Matt Taylor of SEC. I've got nothing to add at this point. So the architecture of the townhomes that we propose is the same as what we'd previously seen. So it was just, as Mr. Blomley said, a more cohesive development, which I think is what council asked us to come back with. Street network is basically the same, maybe identical to what we had previously.
All right, thanks, Matt. Any questions from the Planning Commission? Seeing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second for a public hearing on the second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Public hearing set for November 2nd. All right. Any staff reports or other business?
I have a couple of introductions.
Okay, yes, please do.
Sure. So in addition to Mr. Prince, our newest planning commissioner, of course, we'd like to welcome Mr. Prince to the Planning Commission. We're excited to have him on board. I know he's eager to get started, and he got a good meeting to get started on today. So also like to welcome two new members to our staff. Ms. Ashley Fulgham, who is a support specialist 2 in our department. She started a few weeks ago. She transferred over from the Parks and Recreation Department. She's filling in for Ms. Jaco today, who had an appointment to get to this afternoon. But we are happy to have Ms. Ashley Fulgham with our department. She's doing a great job so far, and as Mr. Halliburton knows, she will be our recording assistant for the BZA and the Historic Zoning Commission when they actually meet again. It's been a little while, but so we're excited to have her on board. We're also excited to have on board Ms. Jennifer Knopf, who is our newest project engineer, sitting next to our second newest project engineer back there, Mr. Gabriel Moore. Ms. Knopf comes to us with about 20 years of experience at Metro. She worked for Metro as an engineer and came highly recommended to us. She's been here. This is her second week, and we're very excited to have her. And I know that Mr. Moore and Ms. Knoll are both excited to have another engineer in the department as well. And so we'd like to welcome them both on board.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, welcome.
Look forward to seeing you in the future. All right, are we done?
Training, we'll be getting you your training log here soon. If you see any discrepancies, anything that you've attended that you need to add to the log, please let us know. We'll be looking to send that out in about the next week or so.
All right.
I was trying to think of some other business, but I couldn't come up with any.
I'm about to turn y'all's mics off.
You confused us enough today, so yeah.
We've got an appointment, Mr. Ives, after this.
With that, we're adjourned.